Thinking about self-publishing and don't know where to start? Join the Spa Girls each week for 30 minutes of honest advice, tips and resources. I'm Trudy J and I am here with Shah Barrett.
Morena.
Wendy Vella.
Hello.
Cheryl Phipps.
Good morning.
And we have a very special guest with us today. We've got Becca Syme, who is a cozy mystery author, a writing coach, and she's also the queen bee of the Write Better Faster course. And she's going to, yay!
Woo!
So we're
Yay!
really excited to have you here, Becca.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me.
Now, I'm going to be really mean and just pass over to you for a quick bio. So you can just basically where you've come from, how you got into writing and that kind of thing. That would be great.
Cool. Yeah, I have a background in coaching, actually, in consulting and coaching from a corporate nonprofit / sort of background. And so I was always writing on the side, like wanting to write, wanting to be a writer. And interestingly, I got downsized, which was kind of a shock. Obviously, I got a really excellent severance package and it allowed me to kind of make the transition into full-time writing because it happened at a time when indie was really starting to rise. And so I got fired and I became a full-time writer. And then I got back into coaching after I had been writing for several years because it kind of comes out of me wherever I am. I was joking. I was like, I do it on the plane and the bus and whatever. It comes out of my mouth. So,
oh, that's really cool. Okay. And so you do one-on-one kind of sessions, or is it mostly through the course that you run, or?
I do. So I do both. In the course, you get a one-on-one as part of the class. Okay. And then I do both one-on-one and then one-on-team or one-on like writing partners. I do a lot of, hey, we're going to be writing together. How does our personality mesh with each other and that kind of stuff. So I kind of do the gamut.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so so in terms of the Write Better Faster course, it's got some very specific things that you teach in there. I'd love to know how all of that came about. Was that because of your background in consulting and training? Is it you knew that already, all that stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually got trained back in 2006, the early 2006 by Gallup, the Strengthsfinder, Clifton Strengthsfinder, which is a success metric based personality. So a personality test. So they were trying to study like, how are people successful? Is there a pattern to the way that people are good at things? And then they created the psychometric test, which is the test of what your personality is, right? By behavior. So by behavior. And I got trained in that because I was using it in the organizations that I was working with. And that's the thing that I just sort of started doing all the time. It just kind of, I love it so much. I got coached in 2006 and it changed my life. And so I was like, I want to do this for other people. And I started utilizing that. And that's really where this class came from, is everybody's brains are so different. And because they're so strong in these certain areas, it's like we assume everybody else is like us, or we assume that if everybody else appears to be one way and we're not that way, that there's something wrong with us, when usually it's that there's something really, really right with us and everybody else is just different than we are. And so it's kind of like a focus lens on who am I as a person? How is my brain wired differently than everybody else? And then what does that mean for how I execute writing, marketing, life, marriage, relationships, everything, because it colors everything. So
wow.
Yeah, that comes out of my background.
Okay. So then, when you decided to do this course, you incorporate all of that into it, and that's what someone can expect when they do that with you. That's fantastic. I totally want to do that now.
Yeah. I would love to have all of you. It'd be awesome.
Well, so I'm putting my hand up here to say I've done Becca's course and it was absolutely fantastic. And as somebody that collects how-to and self-help books as a hobby,
we can vouch for that. She does.
I'm pretty sure there isn't one that I haven't read. And so, but I just discovered so much from this, and it was so, I guess, relieving to know that it wasn't actually what was wrong with me. It was more about what was right with me and how to use those strengths, and that's what I absolutely loved. It's not about fixing it's not about that you're broken. It's just about recognizing that you process and learn and apply in different ways. And it was really, I'm going to try and say a big word here, revelatory. I think that's right.
Yes.
So, no, absolutely fantastic. 100% endorsement.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
And we are not getting any kickbacks or
No,
I just feel the need to mention that from this endorsement. Okay, so we wanted to actually sort of delve into a little bit of the kind of stuff that you talk about in the course, and so when you say write better faster, I don't know an awful lot about the course, but my first impression would be, normally when it's about writing faster, it's about, certain methods to write faster or to build up the muscle. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Or it's about using brain science to...
Yes, it is not a tips and tricks class. And this is super important, I think, to understand. If what you're looking for is, I haven't been able to write fast in the past, and I want someone to crack a whip over me and force me and give me the silver bullet. That's not what this is, because there definitely are, there are some people out there who are trying to write faster, and it's actually to their detriment, and they need to understand why it is to their detriment. That's not true of everybody who's trying to write faster, but some people need this class because they need to understand that writing faster isn't actually how they're going to be the most successful. Like, I talk a lot about find your gold, like you're mining for gold, right? Not everyone's gold is in the faster bucket. Some people's gold is in a different bucket, and they need to understand why. They need to understand their why, really.
Okay. Yeah. So where do you start out? Like, how do you, can you talk to us a little bit about, I don't know, I'm trying to sort of think, if we're talking generally for our audience, if we're, what are some of the different personality types or some of the different things that someone might say, oh, that's totally me, that will kind of...
So we do 2 different types of testing in the class. We do one that's like a binary testing, which is I'm either this or that, right? We talk about this a lot contextually because everybody's familiar with Myers-Briggs. So it's like, am I an introvert or an extrovert? And so you fall somewhere on the scale. If it's a introvert on one side, extrovert on the other, I'm somewhere on that scale. And how does that particular place that I'm located change the way that I might write? For instance, so because extrovert, introvert seems to be one people are familiar with. If I'm extremely extroverted, that doesn't just mean that I like people. It means that I process verbally. So I process after words come out of my mouth. So when I say something and I think, oh yeah, I really meant that, or okay, I didn't mean quite that thing, that's because the process is happening after the words have left my mouth. Whereas someone who's an introvert, internal processor, is processing inside. And so knowing whether you're one of those things, for instance, you have a writing partner who's always trying to get you to brainstorm with them, and you're an introvert and you're like, I don't like that, but I don't know how to explain to them that I don't. And now you can say, well, I process internally and you process externally, so that I'm happy to do this for you, but it doesn't help me when I'm stuck to do that, right? Like, that's really the kind of language we're looking for here.
Yeah, okay. So what about if you're in the middle? I totally feel like I'm that, is it ambivert in the middle? Like I have a few of each? Is that, do you just have to kind of roll with those punches?
Yeah, so you would roll with the punches, but what we say is then you wouldn't use that for decision making. So you would use something else, like one of the other either or scales or one of the capacity scales. So do I have a capacity for caring whether things are accurate or not? How high my capacity is for that changes how I make decisions. That might be where you go for your decision making. For me, the core of this class is about making better decision makers. Like, I don't want to make your choices for you. I want to help you understand what's going on in your brain so you can make better choices on your own. And so I would say if you're in the middle, then we don't use that as a place to figure out what your process should be, because you could do one or the other easily. So you can do both.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I'm very much in the middle, Trudy.
Yeah.
So I was like 48, 49 kind of thing on both ways. And to be honest, it also depends on kind of energy levels and that kind of thing on which way I'll go. So, it's, it's cool being in the middle, Trudy, just saying.
Yeah, we're cool. Go us.
Cool. So it's quite important for someone who's beginning at any stage in their writing career, actually would be a great course to take, wouldn't it?
Yep.
You know, if you're a writer that's been writing a while, like me, for instance, and you're sort of maybe hitting a brick wall or mentally struggling with a few issues, it'd be quite good to do something like this to sort of clear your head a little bit more and get more of a direction and a process in place. And likewise, someone starting out who sort of is a little bit overwhelmed with everything and finding a direction and which way they want to go. It would be brilliant for that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think you really nailed that, because it is equally beneficial for all different writers. It can help beginning writers know who to listen to and who not to listen to, as far as like there's so many voices out there, right? Yeah. Who do I trust, and how do I know how to evaluate who to trust? Because that's a big question. But then a lot of seasoned writers who've been writing, let's say, I mean, I have people who've written 100 books who take this class, and they'll say the same kinds of things. Like, I always struggle with this one thing, even though I've written 100 books, I wish that I could be different. And I'm like, why do you need to be different? Can't you just accept the way you are? You know, like, and that's a lot of what happens, right? It's like, why not just lean into it?
Yeah. And we do, but we do that, right? Because, we look around at all these other people and we say, why can't I be doing what they're doing? Why can't I? They're being successful because they're writing a book a month or whatever. I want to be like that, without kind of saying to themselves, what can I do and how do I work and what's my personality say? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, lean into it for sure. That's one of the big fallacies, actually, that I challenge in the class, is that the system is what makes someone successful. So, for instance, if you say the person who's writing a book a month, well, if I write a book a month, then I will be successful. But that's actually a logical fallacy for an awful lot of people, because people who are not wired to do that sort of just get words on the page and writers write and that kind of stuff, they're going to fail at that system. And then they're going to feel like a failure, and it's going to impede their ability to succeed in the areas that they could be more successful in. Yeah. So then my saying is always, it's not the system, it's the person executing the system. And that's true for productivity systems, for plotting systems, for writing systems. You have to know that the system is not magic. It's the way the system applies to your wiring and how it fits with your wiring that is magic. And so many people take these courses and they fail at the execution and they don't know why. And then they come into my class and they're like, I've tried every productivity system out there, blah, blah. Why isn't this working? And I look at their results and I talk to them and I'm like, oh, well, this is why. And now we tweak this. And it's like, oh, like, I didn't know that was a thing, right?
Could you give us some of the common ones that you come across? Like when someone is, say, for example, failing at writing a book a month, what are some of the reasons why that might be something that,
So the biggest reason why people can't write a book a month is because they are wired to process information on so much of a deep level that it takes them time to execute that process. And so they I challenge fallacies, right? This is one of them. Writers write. Writers write every day. That's a fallacy. Not every writer writes every day. That's just the reality. Not everybody's wired to write every day. And so somebody who is a big, like we call it intellection, it's that you process and process and process and process. Somebody who's wired like that will think and 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 then write, right? Sometimes that thinking process is going to take them a long time. And there is not a way to short circuit that in a way that still produces the quality of book that they want to write. So in that case, I have to say, would you rather give this up? Like, would you rather be the person who writes the kind of book that you don't want to write or the kind of book you want to write? And if the process that you're getting there is the way to get there, are you okay with not writing a book a month? That's a lot of what I do, is ask those kinds of questions. Like, this is what you're going to get because this is how you're wired. You can't get around that. So productivity systems will almost always say, stop thinking and start writing, throw the words on the page, vomit the words, like you can't edit a blank page, all that stuff. For people who are wired that way, it works great. Awesome. For people who are wired to think, it doesn't work well for them because they want to think before they put the words on the page. So if you tell somebody who's wired like that, don't edit as you go, or you can't edit a blank page, you've just thrown a bunch of kryptonite into their life, and they're going to stop writing because they can't understand how to write without thinking. And so they need to know it's okay to be who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Do you get a lot of really relieved people when you tell them this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
and also that feeling that you're going to fail, so you don't start. You know, like there's so many people out there that are just absolutely sort of stifled by that, aren't they? You know, because there's so much success out there. So if I don't write this book, then I'm not going to fail. But if I, you know what I mean? It's sort of, I know so many people like that. Yep. And it's, you know, and is that something you deal with?
Yes, a ton. Both the fear of failure and the fear of success we talk about quite a bit. Because a lot of people feel like if they're having fear, that means they shouldn't be writing. But fear is part of life. You don't stop doing things because you're afraid. And that's a big thing that people don't understand. They don't understand the biological causes of fear. And so they wait till the fear goes away to start writing instead of writing while there's, you know what I mean? So it's like,
isn't there some saying that's like, if you, when you feel the fear, that's when you should be doing it or something? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Like like fear isn't a reason to stop doing something, but biologically we're wired to fight or flight when we feel afraid. And so it's totally normal for us to respond that way. It's just, once you know what's really going on, you become the owner of your own decisions. And that's really what I'm trying to do in the class, is to make you be able to have control over your decisions instead of being controlled by outside factors and other people.
And a part of that would certainly have to be an appreciation of the fact that you are different to other people and your lifestyle is different. So if you're a mother, a solo mother of 3 kids, and you're trying to keep a part-time job and write as well, that's not going to equate to somebody that's writing full-time, doesn't have anybody interrupting them. You know, it's just a totally different world.
And sometimes acknowledging that is so important, to say, like, and not that I would ever ask anyone to give up time with their children, but if I put a question like, would you rather spend time with your kids or write books? And if they say, I'd rather spend time with my kids, then it has to be okay for them to choose that. Like, they're the boss of their own goals, and nobody can tell you should want to make money more than you want to be with your kids, or you should want to be with your kids more than you want to make money, if those two choices are at odds with each other, which they're not always. But if they are, it's got to be up to you what your goals and your success looks like. And not everybody has been in business before where they've been asked those kinds of questions. And so a lot of this is just taking what I've learned in, like, business consulting, nonprofit consulting, and applying it to writers where maybe nobody's ever asked them these questions before, and somebody needs to.
So expectation too, isn't it? You know, like expectations from someone who's beginning to someone, say, who's written 50 books or whatever, that it's so different, isn't it? But I think the pressure just applies in a different way. The more you write, the more success you get, the more, you know. So I guess it's quite good to sort of stop, regroup, take a course like this, and then, you know, carry on, because I think you can go down a sort of a path, can't you? So you need to sort of
I think that's a fallacy in and of itself, though, that, you know, suddenly if there's some magic number of books and suddenly all these issues that you're facing, or the frustrations just magically disappear, and that is a complete fallacy.
That's why I like this class so much, because it attracts both people who have never published anything. Like, I have actual people who've never even written a book who take this class and want to know their process. And then on the flip side, I have like multi-award winner, multi-published 6- and 7-figure people in the same classroom. And it really helps them to see each other and see how the other people are also struggling with maybe the same brain science stuff, but at a different place in their career. And it helps a lot of the unpublished or young published authors to see some of these other people being like, every time I sit down to write a book, I'm afraid I can't do it again. And we're like, you've won 7 Ritas. How can you feel that? And I'm like, but that's so normal. And like what you said, Char, it's not going to go away just because you do it more, because it's wired into your head to think this way. And so let's just embrace it and work with it instead of trying to feel like there's something wrong with us or like we should be different or whatever. Like, embrace it, know it, own it, and then let's move forward with it.
Yeah. What about guilt? Is guilt one that you come across quite often? People feeling guilty for spending time on writing, or is it not?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is part of why we do the one-on-ones, because there are some things that people don't feel comfortable talking about in public with other writers. It's like, I don't want to acknowledge certain things about what I secretly think, but then I think that nobody else has those feelings. And then in the one-on-ones, I can say, look, I've coached almost 2,000 writers, 4,500 to 5,000 people. It's perfectly normal to feel the way that you're feeling. And also, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means we have to work on a strategy to get around that feeling, because you have a priority that's causing that. You have a desire and expectation that's causing that. And we need to talk about that one-on-one instead of it being, it's not just an information dump. In other words, like, I can't just throw all this information at you and be like, good luck, everybody, because that's not my style. Like, I'm not willing to have people come into the class and leave without getting their stuff addressed. And so we do the one-on-ones so that I can talk to everybody who wants it. Some people choose not to do it, and that's their total choice. But I want to offer it because I want complete success for everybody. I'm not willing to accept not success.
That's really cool.
And you learn a lot. So from being within the class as an online forum as well, and as Becca said, you can contribute or not contribute as much as you want, but each lesson you talk about it, well, you can do, and it is, you learn a lot from other people, and it's kind of, again, reassuring that you see, it is reassuring. I this may make me sound petty, but when you're seeing, a 7-time Rita winner struggling with the same things that little old me is, it's kind of like, okay, it's kind of like, there's hope for me yet.
Maybe I'm not an imposter.
Yeah.
No, you're not an imposter.
No, that's it. Good old imposter syndrome is alive and well, man, in the writing community. It really is. And the other thing, one of the things that we talk about a lot on our podcast here, Becca, is, and we say it pretty much every single one, which is, there is no one right way to do something, and everybody's different. And we say this, and that came through so clearly for me within this class when the whole pantsing versus plotting thing came up. That old chestnut that gets trotted out.
Yep.
So can you, maybe Becca could talk to us about that? Like, how does that work in terms of people's writing?
Yes. So this is super interesting because people fall pretty clearly into the camps based on their wiring. Like, it's, what do you need out of how prepared do you need to feel to start the book? So there's this age-old productivity thing about, if you outline every single scene before you write, then you'll write faster. Well, that works great for people who need to be prepared before they start writing. But some people, we call them subjective deciders. So you decide from inside the subject instead of objective, which is outside the subject. If you're a subjective decider and you start plotting, you have just told the story and now you don't want to tell it anymore. And that's why, quote unquote, pantsers can right.
This is windy all over.
And they feel so guilty because they're like, well, everybody says you should plot, and plotting is the way to be successful. And if I'm slow, it's because I'm not plotting effectively or not outlining effectively enough. And then I come along and say, well, actually, it's a brain chemistry thing. How prepared you need to feel in order to start something is about how you're wired. And if you don't need to feel prepared and then you over prepare, you have just thrown kryptonite into your lap again. And it's like, stop doing that, everyone. Just do. Because, and Shar may have heard this. This is the funniest thing that happens in class. The most consistent question that I ask is, okay, but when were you successful at doing it, right? Because there's always a time when we felt successful writing. And I'm always going back to that feeling of like, when was it working? And what did you do that broke it? Well, I started listening to, okay, there's your problem.
It's brilliant. It's so true, though. It's so true. We're all so different, aren't we? You know?
Yeah. That cracks me up. That, what you were just describing about a person who was a pantser and how they don't do certain, it's like exactly Wendy. Like, she's trying to plot. She desperately is trying to plot and she just can't. And it drives her nuts, but she's like, it just doesn't work for her. And that's...
Please don't.
But then, you know, it totally blocks me. But you got someone like Cher who has to plot some and then writes. Yeah. So that she's a half and half, you know, and then you've got Trudy who writes quite a large outlines now, don't you? So it's you know, we're all on and off, don't you? You know, you'll rework things. But I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing how we're all so different when we write.
Yeah.
For me.
But somehow we assume that we're all the same when we're looking for solutions, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, what did X, Y, or Z productivity guru say that you should do to get faster? And we never stop and question the premise. And we're always like, okay, well, writers write every day, but do they? Like, I know a ton of successful writers who are spurt writers, and they only write. I had one writer who literally would write the entire book from start to finish at one time. Like, she would just write 45 hours in a row and then not write at all for like months. And she's a 6-figure author. She writes fantastic books. And I'm like, so are you telling me that she's not a real writer because she doesn't write every day? Well, no. Well, then why would you say that, right? Like, it's because the conventional wisdom, quote unquote, just gets passed around and no one ever thinks to question the premise. And that's what I want people to do in this class is always stop and say, but do they? Like, you can't edit a blank page, right? But can't you? Well, you can edit a blank page, and if you take the class, I will tell you how.
Okay, good.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'm taking it.
Well, what happens when you can edit a blank page is that you do all your editing in your head before you even put the words down on the page. Like, the reality is, I just gave away all of the big tips. No, I'm kidding. No, there's
a ton more.
So
question the premise.
And so the other thing that I was that naturally occurred, even though the class is called Write Better Faster, but one of the things that was really apparent to me as taking it, but also is helping people deal with the business of publishing, the business of being a writer, whether you're part-time or full-time. A lot of this understanding helps with that too, you know, and how many forums to read, or how to kind of get your information, or how to sort out what works for you, how to plan your launch plan, and all that kind of thing as well. So it goes beyond just the words on the page.
So for you, Becca, is that again based on your personality? So if you're someone who can deal with all that, you do it, and if you can't, then you don't. Is that kind of
yeah? And there's so much of this that is, when we look at all these different grids, right, and capacities. So we look at the either or grids, we look at a couple of different capacity scales. If I have a high capacity for something, then it really affects my ability to do certain things. If I have a high capacity for drive, for instance, which is like forward motion, moving, executing, getting things done, then I'm going to act differently than somebody who has a lower capacity for that. And when you have a lower capacity for that, how do you still execute? How do you still get things done? Or how are some of my other capacities maybe impacting my ability to get things done? So like, that's a lot of what we talk about in the class, is every single thing you do is impacted by how your brain is wired differently from other people every single thing.
Because there's some things I imagine when you talk about, low or high capacity to do things, there's some things that you just have to do in self-publishing. You can't not do them. So is it also, do you
can't you?
Oh, you're just going to mess with my head now.
I know.
Oh my God. Okay, let's say you have to publish your book.
So you have to publish your book. You have to upload, right? Like there are certain things you have to do, but then there are certain things that are common knowledge that you have to do. Like, and I'm just going to be this person, like be on all the social media channels. You do not have to use social media in order to be an effective author. You just don't have to. And especially if it's keeping you from writing books. Then you don't have to. So like, again, and I didn't mean to sort of be, that person, but I'm like, the reality is we don't think enough about those things. We just assume that because everybody seems to be saying you have to do X, you have to write every day, you have to be on every social media channel, etc. Then we're like, yes, you have to do these things. You must do these things. And we never stop and say, but do you? I don't think so.
I love you. I think you're amazing, Becca. You're just I'm just putting that out there right now.
But Becca's not going to let you get away with it, Trudy. She's going to say, well, why don't you want to do that? Like, what is it that's holding you back? It's not just enough to say, I don't want to do something, but it's like, well, why? What is it a fear? Like, what is behind that? So,
she's not giving you a pass, Mark.
No, there's no say. This is not a hall pass, babe.
So what I was trying to say before was when you've got a low capacity for something, as part of, can you be someone who says, can you work around that capacity to do what you need to get done, if you know what I mean? So if I've got a low capacity for getting stuff done, are there things that you help with to kind of figure out how I can get those things done, or is it?
Sometimes. And that's a great question, because it really gets at the core of what the better, faster. So if you notice, if you look at the title, I don't say better, comma, faster, because I don't assume that everyone should be writing faster or writing better, etc. Like better, faster as a concept is in your areas of highest strength are where your highest capacity for growth is. So I'm going to tell you a quick story, and then I'm going to answer that question because that's a great question. So to do the study of success that Gallup did, that Clifton did, they did a series of experiments to sort of validate this idea that you have a higher capacity, like an exponential capacity in areas where you're already naturally strong. So they did this one particular experiment that I love, and I talk about this in the class. They took two groups of readers who had not been through any classes about reading speed. One was an average group. It started off at 70 words a minute. And the other was an above average naturally group. It started off at 140, I think, 140 words a minute, which is higher, right? So they put them both through the same speed reading class. And then at the end, they retested everybody's speeds. So the group that had started at 70 doubled their speed to like 150. And the group that started off at 140 ended up at 3,000 words a minute.
Oh,
3,000. It was there. That puts you in the top 1% of all speed readers in the world at that speed.
I don't even know how you could read 3,000 words in a minute. That's just.
You can if you have that capacity, right? And so when they were running these experiments, they were like, there has to be a way for us to prove this. They found the way to prove it. Basically, the whole concept of better, faster with a hyphen is if you can find the areas where you're wired to naturally be good at stuff already and you apply time and intention and development to those areas, you're going to get better, faster. Mm-hmm. So what we want is for you to write better, faster, to market better, faster, to plot better, faster. Yeah. And so in order to answer your question, to go back to that question about can I do things that I'm not, maybe I don't have a high capacity for high drive, how do I still execute stuff? So some of the questions I ask are you trying to execute too much? Like, do you need to pare back on what you really are doing? Is some of that you're trying to execute because you have FOMO, fear of missing out? And if it is, then let's pare that expectation back so that you can be executing a smaller number of things more efficiently. Or is there a place where you have higher capacity that we could apply that capacity to? Let's execute the stuff by using something else to get that done. So there's a lot of sort of nuance to that, obviously, but that's kind of the short answer, is that, yes, you do absolutely have to do some stuff that you're not going to be the best in the world at, right? But you're probably doing more than you should be, just in general, of the things that you don't need to be doing because of the fear of missing out. And then additionally, there are ways to do that. Some of them are, like we talked about, accepting the way that you're wired and working with it.
Yeah.
That's a lot of better fastering.
Yeah.
And allowing yourself to be who you are. And maybe you're not the person who's going to have 5 calendars and get 15,000 things done per day. But can you execute the 10 things you absolutely have to do? Yes, you can. But let's pare you down to those 10 things, right?
Yeah.
So it's a real mindset shift, isn't it?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Change.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
So
hey, we have a class that starts today, actually.
So there you go.
I'm in.
Yeah.
You're all welcome.
So you're essentially looking for the things that you're good at, and those are the things that you can exponentially kind of increase, and then looking at understanding maybe what you might not be as good at, and looking at ways to kind of mitigate or kind of, make that okay, or maybe just don't do it because it's not how you work. Like,
yeah,
it just cracks me up when you're describing the pantsing versus plotting, and it just every single thing. I'm harking back. I'm repeating what we've already said, but honestly, you were describing Wendy and how she's been trying to plot and feeling like she was supposed to plot, and that there was something and she was getting angry about the fact that the plotting was blocking her, and why couldn't she plot?
Yeah,
and you were just saying, don't need to, because that's just not how your brain is wired, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, and there's a whole complicated brain answer that I could give, right? But the bottom line is, if you're not wired that way, don't try to have success at it, because it's going to be, and I always say this, that would you rather be in the 70 to 140 group where you're madly trying to work at things that you're average at, or would you rather be in the 150 to 3,000 group? Like, let's be honest, we would all rather that it was be 3,000. We'd rather be in the top 1%, right? All of us would be. And so that's my thing, is like, I'm a maximizer. I want to maximize everybody to being where they're excellent to where they could be superb, where you could stand out, where you could be at your best. And there are several steps now to this Write Better Faster. And Char may have seen some of these and may not, but like, I'm adding a step of doing just StrengthsFinder for writers, and then doing a Write Better Faster 2.0 where we go to the next level and some of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the 2.0. I'm down for that one.
It has been so fun to see people get to that next level, but this is definitely a long-term process, not because you guys need me, because some of you don't. Some people who take this class take it, learn, and I never see them again, and I bless them on their way, and they're awesome. And some people want to keep leveling up, and then I'm happy to do that, because that's what I do in the coaching with people, is I want them to level up.
There's a lot of layers to it, and I mean, I have reread the materials as well. It's not a sign on for 5 minutes. Like it there's quite a lot of self-reflection as well, and self-analysis in order to kind of dig in. And for me, as one of those people that needs a lot of internal processing, it's actually taking me quite a while, and things are still kind of sinking in, or a little bell that's going off. Oh, okay, that's why I'm doing that, or why I'm not doing that. So
what are some of the more common kind of epiphanies that people have? Do you have people, I guess we've talked about some of them, but do you have ones where they're kind of consistently going ping, and it's like you watch it happen?
Yeah, all over the place. And so they interestingly pattern along with the brain types, right? Like it's things that are the most consistent. And I use this example a lot because it's so easy with the introvert extrovert thing, right? It's like when you have a writing partner, a writing cohort, and everybody else is different than you, and you're the one who needs to write on your own and can't just sit around in a coffee shop and with everybody around. And you're like, why are all my friends asking me to do this all the time? And all of a sudden you realize it's because they're all extroverted external processors, and it helps them to be able to talk about where they are in their writing in the middle of it. And they'll stop at the table and be like, I don't understand. What if they did, never mind, I fixed my own problem. Okay. And back. Meanwhile, the introvert is like, well, all of you just shut up and I need to focus and write and think, so you have these epiphanies of people being like, oh, so that means there's not something wrong with me. It's just that we're different. Right.
Yeah.
The most common one is I'm not wrong. I'm just different. That's the most common.
Yeah. Because when I think about it, there are an awful lot of prescriptive, do this, this, and this, and you will be successful kind of methodology out there. Like, if it's productivity, if it's writing faster, if it's plotting versus, there is, and so it is probably quite common, I would imagine, that people are thinking, why isn't this working for me? I don't understand why I can't make this work. I'm a bad person.
Yes. I'm a bad person. Yes. And they assume there's something wrong with them. Like if I tried, and I pick on some of the big classes that go on right now when I'm talking to my friends, and I'm like, 75% of people can have success with, let's say, a certain type of class that you're taking on, like how to run ads, for instance, right? Like a lot of people have success with this. And then when you don't, the person who's teaching the class can't explain to you why you're not having success, because it works for them. And they think that you're not trying hard enough, or you're not collecting the right data, or there's something wrong with your system, or you're not focused, or you're not putting in the time. And I turn around and say, it's because you're not wired that way. And oh, by the way, here's a resource for you to be, that's for people who are wired differently than you, and you can make that work and you'll be okay. And they're like, oh, so there's not something wrong with me? Right. Because they assume it's because I'm stupid. I'm not smart. I can't figure this out. So there's something wrong with me because everybody else is using this. But what they don't see is all the people who are using it isn't working are also not saying anything about it.
Yeah.
It's very tough to come to that understanding that one shoe doesn't fit all, isn't it? I mean, whoa. Very, very tough, isn't it? That was Cheryl rustling.
Sorry.
It's very, very tough, isn't it, to come to that understanding that if you don't do something, you're not going to get the success. I mean, it's pretty tough for someone starting out in this industry, isn't it, to come up against that sort of information. But learning to understand yourself in the early days has got to be vital going forward, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I learned this stuff fairly early in my professional career. I think I was 24 when I first took the Strengthsfinder. And so I had such a different experience in decision making through my career than some of my friends who didn't have this information, because I could point to something that's like, oh, but I'm wired this way and you're wired that way. So your system's not going to work for me. And I would immediately go to that place, whereas some of my friends would be beating their heads against the wall, like, why can't I make this work? And I'm like, okay, I guess I just accept it now. And I want to get other people to that place where they're stopping the negative self-talk, because that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help anybody to think that they're stupid. It only helps them to have solutions. And that, for me, that's really what this class is about, is I want to find people solutions to get unstuck, to stop feeling stupid, to feel like they're competent in what they're doing, to be able to move forward, to have success. Because once you get past that initial barrier, you can start to really sail and soar. And that's what I want to see people do.
Negative self-talk is huge, isn't it?
Oh, it's so huge.
Especially as we spend so much time on our own as writers in our own heads. And, you can be writing a book and you're going, that is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever written.
Exactly.
And it just constant, and then that just rolls onto something else and something else and something else. So to be able to snuff that out would be a fairly awesome thing.
What I was really interested in, you're talking about like all the people who never talk about the failures, and there is kind of, when you think about it, like the silent majority of people who are just you don't want to admit that you aren't doing everything that you're that you do a course and you're not achieving everything that you're supposed to be on the course, and everyone talks about the success stories, but they don't necessarily talk about the struggle stories. And that's kind of cool. That's kind of what you're able to kind of combat almost. It's like, letting people know
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely my hope. And it's not to say that anybody who's teaching these awesome courses shouldn't be teaching them, because they absolutely should. And even I've heard several of them say this system won't work for everybody. And they all say that, and they all acknowledge it, but they can't explain why it won't work. And that's what I attempt to do with this sort of like the capacities and the ability, right? Is if you don't have the capacity for that, then you're never going to be able to do it at the level that you could do something else and be successful at it. So let's move you over there. And they just don't know that when they fail. It's like there isn't a rubric for how to test whether it's me or not. So they just assume it's them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
No.
That sounds awful. Everyone's
So you use all of this in your writing. Obviously it's just really helped you to just, with your writing.
Yeah, I have sort of an interesting journey with my writing too, because I have one of the strengths, which probably a lot of us have if we're listening to podcasts, is called high learner. So it's the desire to reach high capacity in something. Like I want to learn all the process to do this. And these are the people who don't understand why people don't just Google stuff. Like when you ask me the question that you could have Googled, I don't understand why you didn't just Google it. Because that's the high learner. First thing is, right, I want to know this. Well, let me go see what's said about this, right? So that high learner for me was I kept learning and learning and learning at all these different genres. Like I started off in literary fiction. I was writing historical fiction, historical romance, contemporary romance, romantic suspense, all this stuff, getting to capacity and realizing that I was never going to be a standout in that genre. And because I had the capacity to evaluate my own brain, I was like, oh, well, that's why. Like once I started seeing the feedback and realizing what people were saying about the books, and I'm like, yeah, I'm never going to be awesome at that. So let's move on to the next one. And I feel like once I landed in Cozy, it was like something clicked for me. And I started to look at my StrengthsFinder and look at how all these different capacities had kind of lined up for me to be good at this. And now I feel like I've landed somewhere where I can learn. This is my 150 to 3,000, right? Like I'm not at 3,000 yet. Definitely. I'm still learning. I'm still young in this particular genre. But in mystery, suspense, thriller is definitely where I feel like I found the spot where my brain is the happiest and where I have the highest capacity. So now I'm parking there. I'm like, I'm just going to write this stuff from now on. But that's a really common high learner behavior, right? Is to write in a million different genres because you're trying to learn the rules and learn what's good and what you're not good at and what you are. And so it might have looked erratic to some people. My backlist might have looked like she doesn't know what she's doing. She's jumping genres, has too many pen names, blah, blah, blah. But what I knew about myself was I was looking for the spot where I could really find my gold. And once I found it, I'm like, now I can park here. And I feel great about parking here. And so I use this in my own writing in the sense of like, I'm always trying to understand how to be the standout, how to be good, how to be the best. And so, I definitely feel like it's helped me in my writing journey. Yeah.
And I could see someone who didn't have that understanding going, well, I haven't made it in contemporary romance, and I haven't made it in suspense, and I haven't made it here, and then giving up and saying, no, that's me done. I can't do this anymore. I've tried 3 genres. Whereas you were able to kind of say, hey, look, I'm still looking. This is a process. This is something that I need to go through.
Exactly. Or they would listen to someone's advice about only writing in one genre, and then they would stick somewhere that they weren't going to be able to hit where they wanted to hit because they were so afraid of not following the common advice that everybody tells you, which is to write in one genre and one series and blah, blah, blah. If I had done that, I would still be writing Highlanders romance horribly. I would be writing crappy Highland romance and not making money at all. And instead, I feel like I found my spot. But it was because I knew my brain well enough to say, I know everybody says this, but just I know my brain. I know that I'm learning. And so just let me learn, and I'll eventually figure where I need to stay. And I did.
That's awesome.
Well, that makes
Really
me feel
good.
better.
Yeah, that's exactly what Cher's done. Yeah.
Good. You might be a high learner. You might be a high learner and you're looking for your spot, and maybe you found it and maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, then keep going, like keep trying things out, keep testing them, keep learning new genres, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, we think she's found her sweet spot now, eh?
Yay.
I like the idea of being 150 to 3,000. Like that's kind of something that sticks in my head. It's like that whole looking for something that you're then getting up there. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Oh
fantastic.
wow, it's been so awesome.
Has anyone got any more
much.
questions that we want to ask Becca? Or
No.
I think we've taken up a lot of your morning, or actually it's your afternoon, isn't it, Becca? So
We have.
but
So how can people join into the course, Becca?
So if you go to rlsyme.com, there's a little button with the pink, it's very pink. Right,
We
better,
like
faster. Me too. The logo, and if you click on that logo, then there will be a registration page, and so that's the easiest way to find it because it's on the front page of my website. And then if you follow me on Facebook, there's also a link on my author page, but my website's easiest. I do close the class when we hit a certain number because I don't want the class to be too big because otherwise it'd be hundreds of people every month. But so we do always fill. I still have a couple of slots that I opened up just because I knew we were going to do this podcast. And so I'm really hoping they're still open. And if they aren't open and we closed it, then we'll put a link on there to sign up for the first notification list. So you'll be the first people notified when we open the October class.
Yeah.
Cool.
October class.
Yeah. That sounds awesome.
Okay, and where can we be found? Who wants to tell us, Shah?
Well, I'm going to do a slight divergent onto our self-publishing workshop.co.nz because we too are having a class on self-publishing 101, get started with self-publishing, and probably not so much on the brain science, but we're hoping the Spa Girls unique sense of blending science and I don't know where I'm going with this.
There will be no science at the Spa Girls workshop. Just...
But we are learners, so hopefully we'll be able to bring you along on this amazing journey that we're all on at the moment. So that's self-publishingworkshop.co.nz.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Becca, for coming on.
Thank you, Becca.
Yeah, it was a great
Awesome.
We've enjoyed having you.
Yeah.
See you all.
Okay, everyone. Bye.
Bye for now.
Well, bye.
Bye.